guys, welcome back to The Bright Side. Macy here, The Bright Side Girl, and today we're going to be doing my November reading wrap-up. This is coming up to you a little bit late, but I wanted to get it out to you because I did not actually put up a not-so-scary-a-thon reading wrap-up. I had so much going on and I filmed the video. It wound up being like blurry, like sometimes it's hard for me to tell whether the camera's in focus with the ring light because it's like bright in my eyes, and I just did not have the physical energy to refilm it. So sadly, I did not have that one, so we're going to get this one out. So this is going to be everything I read from the beginning of November until we started Jingle Bellathon, which was the 28th, so almost the majority of November. I spent November again trying to catch up on some series. I'm pretty well caught up now. I have one or two that I need to get to after Jingle Bellathon ends. Overall doing very good, and I'm hoping to knock out the last couple in the beginning of the year. I have a bunch of audiobooks that I listen to. I'll put all the narrators down below while I'm talking, and I had one physical read that we'll talk about now. So I physically read Mechanica by Betsy Cornwell. I actually started this back like in, I want to say September, maybe end of August, because I read Mechanica during Retoldathon, and that was actually one of my favorite books of Retoldathon. I'll put the link to the vlog down below. Mechanica is a steampunk fae Cinderella retelling. It is YA. I absolutely loved it. It was so charming and beautiful. This is the sequel, but Mechanica wraps up pretty nicely with only a tiny loose end, so you don't necessarily have to jump into this one. And honestly, I would almost advise against it. Like, there are so many elements that I enjoyed in Venturus, the second book. I loved getting a little bit more in depth with the fae. I loved following our characters, but there is no aspect of the Cinderella retelling in here, which I thought was a little bit strange. I feel like usually when there's a sequel, it's still kind of involved in the retelling, or maybe we get like a different retelling following the same characters, but it's completely own thing. We're also not in the same part of the world that we were in the first book, so it just had a totally different vibe that took you kind of away from the first story. There are so many cool elements in here, but there were a lot of things that I didn't like, and just a lot going on and things that I felt like didn't necessarily make sense, and it just took me so long to finish reading it. I did read a couple things in between during the spooky season, so I didn't just focus on this for the last 3 months, but it just took me a long time to get through, and the first one I read very quickly, so I think this was like a 3, maybe a 3.5 star. Next, I read Seeing Red by Frank Bador. So this is book 2 in the Looking Glass Wars. I started this series again during Retoldathon. It is an Alice in Wonderland retelling. This I also believe is YA. It's very adventurous. It's very well told. I really am enjoying it overall, but I'm trying to like finish series, and sometimes when I do that, I'm not necessarily like in the mood for the books, and this one has like a very heavy British vibe, which sometimes is my favorite thing. I found myself zoning in and out just a little bit, even though the audio is done really well and has like different voices and things. So I enjoyed this one overall, but I think I liked the first book better. Again, probably like a 3.5 star. Then I actually DNF'd Ozland by Wendy Spinell. I'm not sure if I'm going to DNF this one forever. Again, I was just really trying to finish a ton of series this year, and the bad part about that is that sometimes I'm not in the mood to like read the same types of things, and I had a lot of retellings left over from Retoldathon and last year. So this is a full retelling series. The first one is a Peter Pan retelling. The second one is an Alice in Wonderland, and then this one is kind of like a Wizard of Oz. Although I feel like this one was the least retelling like of all of them. I do really love the narrators for these. I just wasn't fully enjoying the story and I was not in the mood. So this is not a permanent DNF, but I DNF'd it for now and took it off my series list. So there's that. Okay, then I reread Once Upon a Broken Heart. This is a reread for me, so I could reread book 2 and then jump into book 3 for the first time, which I'm gonna do in the later half of December. This is a spin-off series from Caraval. You don't have to read Caraval to jump into it, but I highly recommend reading Caraval because I think you'll enjoy it more. 1 or 2 characters from the first series that are in this one. It is so good. It's like magical, original fairy tale fantasy goodness. This is a YA series by Stephanie Garber. Rebecca Solar's the narrator. She is absolutely phenomenal. We have our main character Evangeline, and she's in love with this boy. He's supposed to get married to someone else, and she is distraught and upset by this, so she makes a deal with, I believe, a fate to stop the wedding, and then like chaos ensues and different bad things happen. That's a loose description description, but it is so good and so whimsical and so romantic and fun. So I really enjoyed my reread and I gave it 5 stars again. Okay, so next up I worked on finishing the Monstrologist series. So I had the book 3, which is the Isle of something, and then book 4, which is the Final Descent. I'm gonna hold this one up because I own this one. I read the first one several years ago and then I reread it this fall, and then I read the second one during the Halloween season. So this series follows a young boy named Will Henry, and he is the apprentice to a monstrologist who studies and dissects monsters. This man is very driven and very kind of cold and scientific and very focused. He's almost got like a Sherlock vibe to him. And they're dissecting and learning about these different types of monsters and trying to like help people but also just learn more. And he has been thrust into being his apprentice because his parents died, and he kind of just took him under his wing, but he's not necessarily taking the best care of him. It is very, very gruesome. I would say it leans like middle grade to YA, but it is very, very gruesome. Like the monsters are very disturbing. The way that they like dissect them is like very, very intense and dark. So just be prepared that this is one of the most gruesome / gory books that I have read in the YA genre. I still really enjoyed it because I really, really loved Will Henry and I got so attached to him, and I liked our monstrologist as well, Dr. Warthrop. So I enjoyed the second and the third book. I liked the third book quite a bit, but then this one literally just took a turn that I just didn't understand why, and it got extra dark and extra sad, and I just felt like it was a big letdown, to be honest. Like I felt like so many feelings at the end, which is good, but kind of similar to when I finished Cirque du Freak. I was just kind of like, what was the point of the whole thing if that was going to happen? There's another character in here that's following Will Henry's journal, so you're kind of going back and forth just a tiny bit throughout the whole series, and you're meeting different fun characters and things along the way, and there's different plot lines. But I just was so bummed about this third book. I gave it 3 stars, but honestly I want to give it like 2.5 now. The writing is so good and how attached you get to the characters is great. I definitely want to check out more from Rick, but this book was such a letdown and I was so sad about the turns that it took and where everybody went, things that were left kind of open-ended. So probably like a 2.5 star, maybe a 3 just because the writing was so good, but definitely read the first book. You don't have to continue on with the series, but I really loved that first book. It was done really well. It was creepy and spooky, but also had some good elements in it. So finished one though. Then I read Two Twisted Crowns by Rachel Gielig. This is the second in the One Dark Window duology. Another one that I had mixed feelings about. I really enjoyed One Dark Window. I read that in October. I believe this is a YA duology. The characters are like YA age. We're in this like fantasy world where there is this disease. Kids get the disease, and when they get them, they get some kind of dark magic, and they will like take the kids and put them off somewhere or kill them and get rid of them because they have these like dark ability. And our main character gets sick and nobody really knows her dark magic because she basically has this monster that is living in her head. So she gets away with being sick. They still kind of send her off to live with her aunt, but nobody really knows that she had the disease, and she's kind of just like living with this secret and this monster like talking to her in her head. There are also these really cool magical like cards that do different things, and they need to collect all 12 to like cure the land of this illness. But when you collect the cards, you can use them for different abilities, like to look prettier or to get into somebody's head. And I think there are multiple versions of the same card, but you need to collect 12 of the certain ones. It was so interesting and really in-depth. It was one of the better fantasies I had read in a while. For the second book, I just didn't fully love it. We aren't following our main character from the first book for a particular reason, and we basically are focusing more on 2 other characters, which I didn't fully love. I understood why, but I didn't love. It definitely got a little bit more on the smutty side, which again I didn't love because I just felt like a little bit more of the focus went there rather than the world building and the original characters that we were following. So this one just didn't fully work for me. Like, it's still a good series. I know a lot of people think it's their new favorite duology. I would still recommend it, but for me it was like a 3.5. Then I read Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Susan Collins. I still need to take off these stickers. So I finally read this. I haven't read it yet. I love The Hunger Games so much, and this is the prequel to The Hunger Games. I would still personally recommend reading the original set first because this will just jump further into the world and why it is what it is, but I feel like you'll enjoy it more if you've read the first 3. Just a personal preference. So in this one, we're actually following Snow as a young man, and he is basically going to be a mentor to one of the tributes. Like, all the kids in his class are going to be mentors. I believe it's the 10th Hunger Games, so they're doing some new kind of things, and he has this really interesting tribute that he is in charge of doing, and he's also trying to kind of prove himself. I was really enjoying this overall. It's a very long audiobook. Our narrator is Santino Fontana, who I love. The only bummer, and this was kind of like a production issue, there is a lot of talk of songs in here because our tribute is very much into singing and writing songs, and so there are a lot of like lyrical song poem portions, and they had Santino, our narrator, read them instead of sing them because obviously they'd have to come up with a tune and everything. And I felt like that was a missed opportunity because Santino Fontana is a very famous actor and well-known like opera singer, and he is so incredible. I know she wrote this around the same time that she was going to write or help write the screenplay, or she knew it was going to be a movie. So I feel like they could have built in the songs for both the movie and the book, and he could have like sung a little ditty for us and it would have been amazing. So that part I didn't fully love because he read them out, but otherwise he was a great narrator. I actually really enjoyed following Snow, and I loved learning more about the Hunger Games and certain things that happened I just wasn't expecting. It was so good. The gaming portion of the Hunger Games is my favorite part. I just like learning all the different things and how it came to be, and I loved following some of the new characters in here. I felt like the ending though was a little bit open-ended, and I'm not sure why. There were things they could have leaned into more, and I just felt like it didn't fully satisfy me. I know it was like basically a villain backstory. The ending was even less kind of intense than I expected. I have not watched the movie yet. I really want to, but overall I really enjoyed it and I gave it like a 4 star. Okay, then lastly, I finished physically reading Name of the Star because I started this in October, and then I read The Madness Underneath, which is book 2, and the final book as well. I can't remember the name, The Shadow Cabinet, I think. So I actually really loved this trilogy. I think it was supposed to be a quartet because there's kind of some open-ended things that happen at the end of the 3rd book. This is by Maureen Johnson, who I haven't checked out anything from. I really want to read her Truly Devious series. So in this one we have our main character. I believe she is from New Orleans, so she's a southern gal, and she basically goes to school in London, and while she is there she's kind of shell-shocked and out of her comfort zone. She's so different from everybody there, and these murders start happening that are very reminiscent of Jack the Ripper, and people are kind of wondering like why someone is copying him or whether there's a ghost, and there's like paranormal things happening. I really enjoyed this first book and this second book a lot. The reasoning for the murders happening and the different like elements of the characters and everything was so good. I loved our southern character in a London environment. That was very fun. The 3rd book I felt like took a turn that I didn't entirely love once again. I love finishing series because sometimes it's just so satisfying and it's great, but then sometimes you're like, oh man, that's a bummer. I still really enjoyed it. This one I gave 4 stars. I think this one I gave 3.5, and the last one I gave 3. But I would still highly recommend this, especially if you like very lightly spooky, atmospheric, fall, ghosty type vibes. I preferred physically reading this first book just because I'm not always the biggest fan of southern accents in narration form. Like, I feel like sometimes it just throws me out of the story, or they're like too intense for what I had envisioned, so I preferred reading it. But this book does have a very cool map, and it lists where all the murders are, and it lists the name of the characters and all those different things, so that was very fun. So I did enjoy this series overall, and I would recommend it, and I'm glad that I finished it. Okay, you guys, so that is everything that I finished in November before Jingle Bellathon. I'm basically only going to read Christmas books from here on out, except for maybe Once Upon a Broken Heart and maybe like one other book. So holiday, winter, Christmas reads, I'm so excited. Let me know if you've read any of these down below in the comments. Let me know if you plan to in the future, or what you wound up reading in November and what you love. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at The Bright Side Girl if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys next time on The Bright Side.